Okay, welcome to Pantheism TV. I'm your host, Guyus, and with me again is Waldo Noesta. He, if I can pull this up, he recently came out with a book called, let's see, I and I, A Perennialist Theory of Reincarnation in Cyclical Time. And I've read more chapters of this, and I can already tell you that I'm telling you, I could sit down and talk with you about this for hours upon hours. So it's got me intrigued. It's got me
Let's
intrigued.
do it.
And then
Not tonight, then.
Now joining us is also Peter Moriarty, who is the creator of a very successful Facebook group called Biosophy. And I remember, at least I think I do, when you basically first started that, and that has blossomed quite a bit. That has quite a following.
It kind of takes it gets more membership at times, and then it kind of comes and goes in waves.
So it waxes and wanes.
There are times where there's been just so many people coming through and coming new into the page, and then there's other times where it seems like it just comes in waves.
It all depends on whether Facebook puts the squeeze on it, really.
That was my next point. Exactly. It comes down to what Facebook has in mind for
the
me.
product is consistently excellent. It has nothing to do with that.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate all of your participation and tuning in, and also what you guys do as well. I'll let you finish your intro, though.
And you're also a graphic designer, right? And aren't you the one who designed my all-time favorite mural? In fact, I have a picture of it here. Let me show that. This is in Venice, California. Aren't you the one who did the original design for this?
I did submit this as a design to Perry, and who's the owner of the building. And he did pick this design, but then he and I consulted for a while. So it was a little bit of a group effort. But, at the same time, yes, this was my winning design for the building, which is still there, but I suspect probably a little faded from that original picture. But
yeah, you know what? Actually, I got to worrying that this new tropical storm that's happening. I sure hope. Yeah, I sure hope nothing happens to that.
Hopefully not. His building's pretty strong, so I think that would have to be a pretty intense storm to hurt the building itself. But maybe he'll get a little bit of scrape damage, and that'll encourage him to do another coat. Because I suspect probably could use a little bit more of a refresh. It's very bright sun out there, so I know that the paint will bleach. But I haven't for a couple of years, but.
There's been several nights that I have fantasized, or just several times where I fantasized about sneaking up there really late at night. And you see off to the right of David Thoreau, where that little spot is where the earth starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this nice little spot. Now, so watch it carefully and see what happens. There we go. Now, see, that fits in there nicely.
The Pantheist Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
that could happen. I think Perry also wants to put some paint on the other side that's facing the beach, so maybe we could feature you there.
Wow, next generation, maybe.
That's actually a little egoic of me, which is out of character, but hopefully I can maybe one day truly earn a place among those great pantheistic thinkers. And Alan Watts is definitely one of my favorites, all-time pantheistic thinkers. And I love Carl Sagan, of course. And I need to read more about Baruch Spinoza. I haven't. I've just done a little bit here and there. But yeah, and McKenna. And love Tesla, Nikola Tesla, another one of my favorites.
We had to debate whether Tesla is going to stay on there. But
oh, really? You mean stay on there, even though he's already been like the artist that went through all the trouble to put him up there? Is that because his views weren't pantheistic enough?
You know what? I can't speak definitively on that because there was a lot of different decision making, and there were some people. You know, it's been so many years, about 7 years or so, that he may have been in the debate of whether to stay in or not, but
I just thought he was a brilliant thinker. I actually don't know enough of whether or not he had pantheistic views or not, but I love his mind. I read this autobiography that he wrote, and I think I listened to it as an audiobook, and the person who narrated it sounded like Nikola Tesla, like the accent and everything. And that was like a really enjoyable thing that really helped me learn about his, like when he grew up and the things that he did along the way in his life. And so I kind of got a real good sense of the man as far as that goes. And he was definitely an original thinker. So
he definitely was. I would say you're going to be hard pressed to find too many people on that wall at all that called themselves a pantheist. That's the thing.
That's true. Yeah.
So definitely he had a type, he had a scientific and spiritual view, and those two crossed over. So I think he definitely fits there.
And a lot of them had an earth-centered or nature-centered type of philosophy, which was, Baruch Spinoza, of course, we would think of as pantheistic. But yeah, I guess all the others. But they are, I don't know them all in great detail, but the ones that you have up there, I'm just really happy with in terms of my favorite people throughout history. So. And the composition itself, I just thought was just beautiful. I thought y'all chose the right design. I didn't see what else y'all had to choose from, but that definitely looked amazing. That portrait or that mural.
The artist I got to do at Ponce Levy, he did a great job. I mean, he was able to do, in the amount of time that he was able to put that up there, he did a lot, perfect justice to the original. And
how much did he charge for that?
I'll let you talk to Perry about that, but
that maybe
he charged just a little bit lower than my wife's company, who also put in a bid for it. Maybe a lot lower, but in any case, okay. We both had a little bit of a hand of getting some paint on there, but especially me, I barely touched the brush to the wall.
Oh, but so you did though actually get to maybe do a little like painting?
You know what? I think I worked a tiny bit on in the corner with the.
Hey, just one stroke. That's imagine if somebody got to put one stroke on the Sistine Chapel of Michelangelo's ceiling. That would if I just put my thumbprint in, that would do it for me. Well, I was going to try to kick this off with just trying to, and we don't have to stick with this, but just trying to present our best arguments for or against reincarnation. And I guess I can go first by saying it's the testimonials provided by those who had died and come back from different parts of the world and different cultures and different religions. It just seems like it shares too much similarity when it comes to the initial separation. I know that later it gets to where it sounds too fantasy and dreamlike, like they're in a purple brick hall and it gets weird. I've always felt that, they're like in some kind of illusion or dream world at that point. But just that initial separation when they're hovering above the body and the fact that they come out seeing themselves like that, and then even report things that had happened like in the doctor's room or in the hallway. And then when they come back, they report, I saw this and whatever, and I heard this. And they're like, that's what happened. Now, you never know how much authenticity there is to those stories because, for example, I remember a grandmother was claiming that when she drifted out into the hallway and she heard her son say, I'm just waiting for my grandmother to kick the bucket. And then later when she was revived, she went and asked him about that. And at first he denied it, but then he finally admitted that, I said that, because it was kind of an embarrassing thing to say. But who knows, maybe he finally admitted it because he didn't want her to think that she was just dreaming. You know what I mean? This is what I surmised. This is my assessment. I started thinking, well, maybe he just kind of was being kind and finally gave in because that's what she wanted to believe, So you never know, like when you hear these stories, and I've heard a good number of them. Another good one is with Eric Roberts, the actor Eric Roberts. And I guess he got into some kind of accident. And then he explained how he just started pulling out and he saw his face. And that's one of the common threads to all these stories, is that they see their face first a lot of times, and then they're facing their body from above. And it doesn't even have to be in a room, because sometimes the accident or whatever happens outside and the paramedics are working on them. So, but yeah, it just makes me think, wow, there's a similarity there. And the fact that people from different parts of the world are telling these same descriptions. Now later, as far as seeing the light and stuff like that, that could be attributed to the fact that they're experiencing a similar event, which is the brain shutting down, losing oxygen. So, you could chalk it up to that. But that first initial story of explaining, that sure sounds similar to me. Like there's some type of separation or mitosis on some kind of level, ethereal level or something. So that's one of the things that has convinced me that reincarnation may be a thing. It may be.
I think that's got to be, as far as the different phenomenon that we can look at and say, this is your hard proof, and there's basically anecdotal and basic people's personal experience of past lives, and then there's the near-death experiences, and obviously those are very compelling stories, and I'd like to get into my feelings on that. I want to let everybody have their introduction, but I don't think, other than near-death experience and then just people's personal
anecdotes,
their anecdotes, right? Their story. We have to take it's do you believe this person's testimonial? And I think there's good, compelling reasons to do that.
Well, the other interesting, very similar to that, is when there's been documentation of people or where they froze a person for, I think it was more than 24 hours. It was certainly one of them was a woman who was found in the snow, but then they thawed her out and then revived her. And just for me personally, when I think about that, the fact that the heart clearly was stopped, there must have been technically brain dead. If several hours went by, they were frozen. So just that in of itself is at least maybe the closest version of being reincarnated that we actually have documented scientifically. And then they've intentionally they froze a dog for about 5 to 6 or 7 days, and then brought it back. So it makes me wonder. How
did he report back about it?
Huh?
And what did the dog say?
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah. But just the fact that the brain, that you have this life form that was what we would think of as living. Because, they used to think when the heart stops, a person's dead. But then we found out, well, no, there's brain activity. And so there's a consideration of brain dead. Well, then you can just keep going. It's like peeling an onion. Like, okay, well, let's say the brain's dead. Well, is there something further into the core that is living? And I actually believe that when death happens, it's very similar to when a pilot ejects from a plane going down, or when an escape pod is jettisoned from the mothership that's about to be destroyed. I have this belief, just based on certain things that I've learned in the course of my life, certain things that I've heard and studied in science, that's a likely possibility, that the body is discharging a subversion of you it's just because the universe tends to hate extremes. It does this all the time. Just like when something tries to go too fast and approach the speed of light. What the universe does is it makes it more and more difficult for something to accelerate and approach the speed of light, or to get even a little faster. It takes more and more energy exponentially. And it's almost like the universe trying to put, mechanisms to keep everything in balance. So it's just this mechanism, the way the universe works, like when a volcano erupts and it causes a thin layer of ash to surround the globe. All kinds of weird things happen in nature to push things back into balance in terms of weather and stuff like that. So when anything ever reaches like an extreme point in death, this is a system, a living system. And when it reaches a point of death, that's an extreme situation, an extreme event. And to kind of allude to some of Waldo, what he talks about in his book about the will, it kind of triggers the will to want to blossom and do something to respond to that in some way on some primal level. Just a theory, though. Yeah, so if either of y'all want to kind of discuss some of either why you're for or against.
Well, do you mind, Waldo, if I kind of if I just cut in here, and it's not to take to get in front of you, but it's actually to respond, since I hadn't had a chance, and I'm sorry that I hadn't really chimed in with some of my thoughts. I really was only able to finally finish up yesterday evening and then review it a little bit this morning. But I want to just say that if anybody's kind of hoping that this is going to be a showdown between Waldo and me, or we're going to have a major difference of opinion, I don't want to disappoint people, but I actually think that a lot of what you said in that video was excellent. Waldo, both of what you had to say. I think if we could just kind of touch on every single point you guys made in the last video, that would be, and I'm not saying we should do that, but I'm saying if we did, I would enjoy getting, some discussion about each one of those things. And you said a lot of specific things that I hope we can address tonight. So
I'm sure it'll occur to me to bring up certain points that to reiterate, or because it's going to be inevitable, actually, because these same thoughts that I have, they kind of link together, because in order to understand this, I got to explain this, and it's like a chain of understanding before you get the crescendo of understanding of what it is. I actually have thought about creating a mini series on YouTube, kind of both describing and illustrating, whether it's with animations and images, because this is like probably one of the most profound topics ever discussed, actually, is what happens to us after we die. So even let's say reincarnation is a thing, just to describe that or to trace it down scientifically, that's a hell of a challenge to do. So even if it is true, wow, what a challenge it is to even convince anyone scientifically or whatever, pragmatically, practically. So yeah.
I did want to just say that for the most part, like, as I was saying just a minute ago, I do agree with both of you guys. For the most part, we're going to be, as fellow pantheists, we're going to be largely in agreement on many things. I think that where my main question comes down to is, and we'll get into, I want to hear Waldo's take on this, but where the will, and at the moment of the time of death, decides that this is an important event, or this is the transition period where a new metamorphosis occurs, and then that sets in motion the process of the transference from one body, one time, a location to another. That's the part where my logic is unable to cross that bridge, I guess. However, to just be clear, you had mentioned in your other video that, if we have been born into this reality, that's strange enough. What's to stop something else from very strange and improbable from happening elsewhere? And I'm very open to the possibility that anything potentially strange and impossible seeming to me still may be possible. So even though I tend to be against the idea of agnosticism, just, up front, I am to some degree agnostic about what happens after we die, because I don't recall that happening to me yet.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why I take the stand that I do is because I can't claim that has happened.
Yeah. I actually think that's very responsible of you. It's one of the reasons why I appreciate your writings, your thoughts, and the same for Waldo. Y'all two are like responsible thinkers, and those are the kind of people that I flock to. I try to find people who they don't want to just believe something because they want to believe it, because it's fun to believe it, or it's neat to believe it. But we each kind of need more of a concrete reason to believe in what we believe. So we try to find at least some degree of evidence, something that led us to that view. So it's not out of a vacuum. It's not just because. And also because, like I said, people want to continue. You know, a lot of people, just like the Abrahamic faith, a lot of people believe in heaven and stuff because that's a very comforting thought, you know, and it makes it feel easier to get through life thinking that there's this godlike being listening in and watching over us and that we get to go to paradise. So yeah, and there's a lot of unknowns. Like, even though I do lean towards reincarnation, boy, there's a lot of unknowns. Like, I don't know, for example, if we get to retain our identity and our memories. I think we do shortly, somewhat after. I know that eventually I'm going to lose the identity of Guyus in my memories and whatever. In fact, it already happens now. That's one of the things I was kind of touching on in the first video, which is like when I was 3 years old, I'm not that same person really. I'm kind of an echo of who I used to be. So we're constantly changing. But yeah, so even after death, so there's two different versions, or there's actually a variety of versions, but that I think about. One is I completely get wiped out. You know, the RAM gets wiped out, or the memories, even though I'm still a perceiving passenger that continues on in some way. It's just like almost completely wiped out. I mean, there might be some essence of memories left. But just because of the way I look at nature and the way it's cyclical, if you look at like an oak tree or a pecan tree, and they grow the nuts, which is like an exact replica of what they are, you know, it's just an amazing mechanism. So I wouldn't put it past nature to find ways to create a backup, for example, of all the memories that I have. Again, like if something is separated, that would have, you know, they now know that even each of our cells tend to have a kind of bio memory of what we are. And I found that fascinating. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if somehow something crosses over. But eventually, no matter what, it's going to peter out. I will eventually lose the identity of what I am now. And that kind of saddens me, but it's the reality of the situation. You know, there is something that was on your site, Peter, that let me, because that's worth reading if I can find it. Where is it? Oh, maybe it's in my yeah. Life has always seemed to me. This is a quote from C.G. Jung. And this was within one of your favorite quotes on your Facebook page. And I thought it was great. It says, life has always seemed to me like a plant that lives on its rhizome. Its true life is invisible, hidden in the rhizome. The part that appears above ground lasts only a single summer. Then it withers away, an ephemeral apparition. When we think of the unending growth and decay of life and civilizations, we cannot escape the impression of absolute nullity. Yet I have never lost a sense of something that lives and endures underneath the eternal flux. What we see is the blossom which passes. The rhizome remains. I should have provided a picture to help people understand that what a rhizome is, but they're like the roots underneath the ground with all these shoots, and whatever it shoots and grows up, that's kind of like the individual being. But then once that dies, it's connected to the kind of like the eternal rhizome, if you will. And I know Waldo kind of thinks the same way as I do in that regard, that we're kind of emerged from a fabric, an eternal essence that is unchanging, that is, the cosmic fabric, so to speak. He also refers to the pneuma. So it's kind of the truer essence of you, in other words, or the Atman. Oh, the other thing, in the same way that energy and matter cannot be created nor destroyed, but can only change from one form or one state to another, so too is the case of consciousness or a perceiving mind. That's me. I believe that the consciousness can never be fully extinguished or flattened, or we can decrease consciousness to the level of a snail, the level of a single-celled organism. But when you finally try to tease it out to zero, I really strongly believe nature doesn't like that extreme, and it's going to kick back in some response and try to do some mechanism to try to prevent that extreme. And I also kind of feel that we're part of a continuum. So I don't view us like, if you think of putting together a chair or a car, they have these finite parts that you put these things together and you get a car or a chair, and then you can take those things apart and then you got nothing. I don't look at us as like just these mere parts. I think of the consciousness as part of a continuum, because I think it's plugged into the universe. Because remember, in my view, I think this is my body, the all and all, so I'm all of this, and it's just, there's just an adjustment in terms of that relationship of my consciousness to the all, where that consciousness resides, or where it is.
Now, I just want to just interject real quick. I do want to give Waldo a chance. He hasn't really had a chance.
Yes, I know.
Hi, guys.
Yeah.
But I'm going to just say this one little thing, is that I do actually believe in reincarnation, but not in the way that most people think of it. And that's going to be pretty much the truth about most of the things that I promote through biotheism and biosophy, is that I actually believe in so many of the things that other people believe. I just view it through biology, and I view it through not only biology, but an all-inclusive view of what biology means.
Well,
So I actually think all of those things make sense. And I think everything about reincarnation makes sense, but through the lens of biology. But from there, I do want to give Waldo his chance to kind of, because he can contextualize, where this whole discussion is going to go. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
The concept of reincarnation that has kind of planted itself in me over the last few years, I guess, is not anti-biological in any way. I think that sometimes there's maybe a little bit of reactiveness on the part of science that thinks that to talk about a non-physical semi-permanence to the self is denigrating the importance of the organism. But I can pretty well assure you that that's not part of the theory that I develop in the book. The biological is very much the vehicle, and the what endures transpersonally between lives is not it's not divorced from the biology of the organism. It's rather what becomes the biology of the organism for a time, and then is released from it when that vehicle no longer has viability. So I'm just looking at my cheat sheet here. What reincarnates is not the body, and it's not the soul per se either. I think that's one thing that needs to be clarified. It's definitely not the personality, although I do believe that to touch on the question earlier about whether we remember, whether we have memories of previous lives and everything, I think that we are imbued with the details of our lives and everything that we learn from a carnation. and that is something that we retain subconsciously. My personal testimony is that unawarely, I was not consciously aware of the fact that I've had a previous life, but I am now quite in possession of some facts and some details and things that took effort to dig up, basically, and some life circumstances to bring it about. But I can talk about them as confidently as I can talk about my own, being in high school and being in a teenager, or anything from early part of this life, so that the personality that I had been before is well and gone, but there are echoes of it, in other words, and those echoes, you could call them DNA, you could call them you could call them I think the soul is the vehicle for them. I'm not I'm not dismissing the importance of the soul. I'm just saying that that's not the actual thing that reincarnates.
I noticed that you kind of define soul a little differently than I initially did, and maybe the way most people normally do. I don't know. Like when I normally think of soul and spirit, in fact, I use those interchangeably. That it's usually referring to something that's not only immaterial, but eternal, immaterial, right, or at least ethereal. But yours, when you talked about the soul ride, the soul cycle, and the soul is the ride of the person's life journey and all the sequences. That is the soul, and that's that the physical and the pneuma, the breath of God, so to speak, becomes the soul, and then so there's that, but then like when you were given that whole example about for example, when God, I mean, this is just when you were referring to Wendell Berry's explanation.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, he draws out the perfect
well,
I saw that, I think, for that.
I saw that there was different interpretations of that, because I wanted to look that up, like that last tail part where and then man becomes a living soul. Well, some versions have it to where and then man becomes a living being. I like that one better just because it fits in with the way I.
There's really no difference. That's no more than semantics. It's the same thing.
Okay, so I guess that would depend on how each person wants to, or how they normally would think of soul. For example, I always felt that this is just me. I've always felt that the soul is what continues and which is just always eternal and fixed and unaffected by ego. And the actual definition is kind of alludes to that, but the way Barry and then you kind of talk about soul is temporary and changing, something that like the body, and then when it gets the breath of God, when it gets the will or the momentum to become a living being, it becomes a soul, and then when it dies, the soul is lost or whatever. So it's just a different way of kind of thinking of those terms, and I had to get that straight in my head as I was reading your book, so that way I wouldn't get confused, because at first I kept getting a little confused.
I think some disambiguation is called for there because of the different ways that soul is used, and that's what I aim to do in that part 2 of the book. Because you could call it the divine soul versus the temporal soul. I mean, there's really, I think. The problem of being a perennialist is you end up dealing with a mishmash of terminology that you have to then disambiguate. And
Barry's actually correct in thinking, when he's trying to analyze and refer to that that Genesis 2, chapter 2, section 7, I think, yeah, he's correct in saying that God basically blew in the soul, but just because in that context, it was supposed to be a lifeless, made of dust. Adam was made of dust and was just inanimate object, and then God blew in. If you think, it blows in, the energy to, and then, but for me, I've always felt that the soul is always present or always exist, and then it could be breathed into one host after another. So if you think of it like a crab that moves from one shell to another, kind of a thing, a crab shell.
Yeah.
So even though God blows, I know that both, like Christians, for example, they're thinking in terms of God created the soul right there in that moment. Whereas I would say the soul, or there's this eternal thing that the perceiving passenger, that's me, that moves from one host to another, or one position, one portal to another. And if you think of all eggs, all seeds out there in the world, a piece of fruit on a tree, whatever, those are all like portals that life comes into. It's like a doorway, and it uses that to come into it. So when it comes to breathing into that, it's not just like it's being created for the first time ever. Like before that, Adam didn't exist at all. That's almost what it sounds like.
Well,
yeah,
just so I could kind of participate in this. Honestly, to me, all of that has to be a metaphor. I don't see how anything about like breathing, God breathes into, there are plenty of excellent metaphors in the Old Testament.
That was just me trying to clear that up with Waldo while I had the chance. Just because, like, when we were getting into terminology, it's important for us to know when we say spirit or when we say soul, because he started talking about soul. So it's important.
Sure. We want to get our terms right. Are we getting another echo? Is that something?
Yeah, that came back. So somebody did something that they shouldn't have done.
No, I haven't touched anything.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we were having such fun. So far, it sounds like it's gone away. Okay, let's just hope the universe stays the way it is. Yeah. Okay. That's Waldo pulled out his earplug. No, I'm kidding. Let's see. Yeah, I'm sorry.
A butterfly flapped its wings, actually, is what happened.
What happened?
A butterfly flapped its wings.
That's right. That's right.
In the South Pacific.
And then everything changed. I probably shouldn't have deviated the way I just did, a little bit too more on the metaphoric. So it's kind of good that you even caught that, for us to kind of get more on a, because I know you're wanting to try to nail down some reasons to present to someone as to why they should believe in reincarnation, or just some good, points.
Well, what I personally want to do, that's a big part of what I do, is try to understand, why did a religious tradition of this type arise? Why did this metaphor become the standard metaphor? I'm hearing my voice again, but I'm not sure why that is.
Do you believe that we're constantly, in a way, we're being constantly reincarnated right now as we speak? We're constantly being reformed. Each moment that passes by, the universe has to reinstate us.
Physically, yes, that's true. Physically, we are, on a atomic molecular level, we are constantly adding and subtracting.
Yeah, in fact, I've always thought of the universe as kind of like a cosmic conveyor belt. There's that which is constantly being created and constructed, while other parts of it is being destroyed and destructed.
Right. So think of the soul as the thing that is constant throughout that process.
Well, that's what I would think.
That's That's what the terminology is supposed to indicate.
Now, if we accept that there is an indwelling presence, and I think we've both kind of talked about that, and what was the word you used in the last video? An interiority, or
Interiority.
An interiority. That everything has its own interiority. And that interiority of who, the question becomes, who then is the observer? Now, what I see as this ultimate term of soul representing is the fact that under and beneath, behind, it's not really even under or behind, it's not above, it's interfusing everything, is an infinite presence of what, we can probably all agree that there is an infinite presence. If you turn your mind towards it, it's like if you're a fish and you're in the ocean and you see the ocean. This is something that I think all three of us have experienced enough to say that it's real. But if this is what is constantly incarnating into everything, then that means that it's already incarnated into the next being that I might claim, okay, I'm reincarnating into. Well, how can I reincarnate into something that I already am incarnated? Just, we're all basically from the same source. So am I not a reincarnation of each of you? Why are you not incarnations of me? If we're all the same, if we're all incarnations of the same root source.
Well, I think of it because we each have to have
in a more linear sense. I don't see it as linear. I see it as basically all lines passing by and crossing, and that essentially when I die, my afterlife has already begun. My afterlife is already occurring right now, because once Peter is gone, I continue to exist in all other beings, because we are not really locally real. We are only locally, limiting our belief in our identity.
I agree with that. I just always feel that there's always going to be a nucleus of you, the passenger, the apex, the keystone. So yes, even though this is all connected, and in a way, in a way, y'all are kind of like appendages to me, and vice versa. Now, I can't tap in and have access to your thoughts right now, because of the way the laws of physics works, the way the universe works, it prevents that. So there's a differentiation happening. There's a division, because nature, even though nature has a lot of beautiful unity, there's also divisions, walls, separations, and it's always like this tug of war between those two, between separation and unity. And so
there will never these walls, but we know that these walls are illusion. And I guess that's the crux of the issue, is if we're all incarnations of the one central source, where does the linear path come from?
I'll tell you that what I was trying to explain to Waldo in the first video, there has to be rules, even if it's whatever, it's all connected, or if it's all in the mind. It's like there are these rules and laws that, even though, like you can think of it as all mind, or if it's all one, the way it plays out to, at least to us, the perceivers, the way it presents itself to us, it has to be differentiated. It has to be in forms of division, and not access to everything. Like I don't have access to all knowledge, for example. I don't have access to your knowledge or his knowledge. So there are these absolute separations that have to take place. I'm
not disagreeing with that at all. In fact, that's what I'm saying is that I see I have reasons why, not necessarily philosophically or phenomenologically, why it is that I think it is a better thing to promote our mortality and the value of this one life. But I also am interested in the metaphysics of, for example, if we are all basically from the same source, I'm not saying that we should all have insight. I do think there are maybe limited forms of telepathic communication potentially. I'm not crossing that out. But what I'm saying is that I feel like I have as much connection to all of my ancestors as I do to another life that I say, okay, well, that was my life. I've had times where I felt very strongly attached or connected to another ancient culture. Like there was, when I was studying Hinduism, I felt very attached to ancient Indian and Vedic traditions, and it felt very real to me. And at that time, I did believe in reincarnation, and I believed that I had been, had lived 1,000 years ago in India. I felt similarly when I was learning about Aztec culture, but I wonder how much is that the power of our imagination. I feel this is connected to many cultures in the world. I feel very connected to the people, and I have dreams of being very realistic dreams of being another person in a different life, and they're, believe me, extremely realistic.
Yeah, you're reminding me of something that I was going to say, which is I too have had what feels like memories of past lives. I mean, it's very broad stroked. It's very, and sometimes I even have dreams, but I am at least responsible enough with myself to say, that could be just some memories I had, like when I was 3 years old watching Bonanza with my grandmother or something, just something that I saw on TV of a cowboy getting shot off a roof. And then that imprinted on my little mind, like when I was 1 or 2, or even when I was a baby. So I have like these really almost abstract memories that go way back, and they're very strong with me. Like there's one that I've never forgotten it. And it's just me hovering over like a desert, and I'm flying. So it felt like I was a bird. And I just remember like seeing, it was like a desert, and I see the ocean. And I just have a strong memory of that. And then another one was where I was like in a cave or something and flying around or something, and I can only assume like I was a moth or something. So it's just like a moth memory or something. And like I was telling Waldo, the probability that I was a sophisticated, as sophisticated as a human, a conscious human, the probability that I was that in my very previous life is very low. So it was probably 1,000, if not 1,000,000 years ago, or lifetimes ago, that I was something as sophisticated as a human that could have more articulate thoughts and better memories. So it's no wonder I don't really remember a past life, and why maybe few people might remember something, because just in all probability they were something that had at least some degree of memory in their previous, life. Another thing that I had told Waldo is that documented case about someone who they led the authorities to this farm and explained that he and his girlfriend were murdered, and he was able to find the bodies and the weapon. And it's supposed to be one of the most amazing cases of reincarnation. That one impressed the hell out of me. But that could be, who knows, an elaborate hoax. I don't know. But I was like, wow, that's. And he was violently murdered, him and his girlfriend. And so it might have been just a rare situation where he was a human in the previous, life, and then he was a human again, and that's why he was actually able to kind of remember that one. It's a rare thing for it to line up like that. But usually we're not going to be something as sophisticated as a human until, like, 1,000 lifetimes ago.
I wanted to answer, I don't know what I missed when I was gone, but everything, yeah. I just want to answer the question about what. So, yes, we are the all one, or the omni unum.
He coined that phrase, didn't you? Coin that phrase?
He did.
Yes. Yeah.
Very good coinage.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm working with a new one, Guyus, to accompany.
I like that one a lot. Yeah, I like that.
They're both masculine and feminine, but one is predominant.
Guy, doesn't that mean lead? Guy something usually refers to leadership or lead or a master or dominance of some kind. I don't know. How is it spelled?
Which one?
Like Gaia with an M, I think, right?
Gaia. I mean, what's it start with? G?
It's spelled just like the planet Gaia, like the goddess.
Right. I
of,
thought so.
of Earth.
Okay.
And then by adding an M, I just simply am putting a portmanteau of Gaia and I am to give also basically the sort of that final tetragrammaton authority to a feminine embodiment.
Okay.
To say that the Earth is just as much the I am as any bush or person.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anyway,
Before I have to go, I just want to say so the eternal I am in capital letters is exists. It transcends time, right? I mean, if we're saying it's eternal, we're saying it's also within and beyond time. In order to become limited to a temporal perspective, something has to happen. Some kind of limiting function has to intervene, and that's where I got the idea of fractalizing. That so the pneuma is not conceptually the same as the absolute. It just is a pocket of the essence of the absolute that enters into time. Okay, that's why there is it doesn't lose its contact with the absolute, because the absolute is transcendent of both. It's beyond any beyond any temporal boundary, so which means it's outside and within it. So you don't need to lose your contact with the divine in order to enter into time. Christian metaphors abound here, of course. So there's the idea of Jesus being divine and also being human at the same time.
Okay.
I think that's actually a metaphor for what we all do over and over, so that the pneuma is not the pneuma is the I am in the same way that Atman is Brahman.
Right.
They are not. It's basically the relative and the absolute in this. If you can hold the same ideas together, we the omni unum, or the I am, capital letters, is the absolute. And so what reincarnates is something that becomes relative for a time and then returns to the absolute. And my concept was that it's cyclical in the sense that once it returns to the absolute, it has residues of being what it was before, and from that come desires. From that comes a certain karmic lineage, as I call it, and it may want to return to the relative to finish unfinished business, to be something that it wants to be. It's all based on will. If will is the essential element of the self, then
when I think of will, I think of desire. And I always think of when I think of, in order, because you were kind of talking in your book saying that it's not the physical that gives way or provides the will precedes
the will precedes the physical. Yes, absolutely.
And so I mean, I would say okay with that to a point, like the complex physical being I am now. I do believe that there is a more primordial will essence, but I still believe that there's a physical arena, for example, that facilitates the will. The two go hand in hand. I don't ever see a divorce of the two.
The will can't. That's the thing. The will can't act outside of the relative. It can't act outside of the physical. It has to come into the physical in order to act out what it wants to do. Right.
I've got a couple questions about that.
Sure.
I find that very interesting. Now, when the time comes, at the end of one life, and then the will decides, or not decides, but basically because there is a will to continue onward, and then it goes towards the next incarnation.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a procession, or in other words, is this process done because this is a way of basically for the soul traveling through different lives to continue to accrue new wisdom and knowledge and insight? And is that towards a specific goal? I know you spoke something about teleology. Is there a goal for this process? And if there is a goal, and that is unity with the one, why would the soul, or why would the one, need to go through the process in order to find itself after the long process is over? Basically, what my question is what is the teleological? I can understand the teleological, or let's just say the reason why things that we do as living organisms, I can understand why this behavior or this particular process is in place, because everything biological has a role, a function to play in the life cycle of the organism.
Right.
So what we're talking about basically here is a sort of another life cycle that goes beyond the limits of the individual organism, and is a sort of overarching life cycle of the soul.
That's what I call pneumatic lineage in the book. Yes.
Okay, and just to say that I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage here, of course, because I haven't read your book, but as I'm getting more. Sorry. Yes, I know.
I'm just kidding.
Well, believe me, I'm quite intrigued, because every one of the concepts that you bring up, there is something that when you bring up a concept, there is something I recognize of the truth there, and I want to believe it. And in fact, by the fact that you are putting forward this a little bit more nuanced theory of the samsara and the journey of the soul, it leads me to be a lot more open-minded to it than I might have been beforehand. And actually, I really liked a lot of what I heard from you on this. I'm just having a harder time trying to figure out what that. I can see the soul's journey in terms of an individual life, and as you're in youth, and let me, I'll sum up pretty fast. If you look at the tarot cards, they have the part where you build up your ego, and then you have a series of setbacks, or you decide to turn inward again, and then to dissolve the ego, and then in the final ascent, you become more or less, more and more one with the universe. And that's basically a process that we would go through in the individual lifetime. And that makes sense to me in terms of both individual lifetimes, and then I can understand how the lineages in a family. I'm just I want to get your insights as far as the more metaphysical lineage, or what is the
just to quickly answer from what I read, I believe that he also believes that it helps to better ourselves. When we do this, it's to gain wisdom and to improve our sense of self. But I can't remember. I may be muddying that up a little bit. So
I do think the pneuma is definitely learning as it goes along. I mean, I'm not Gnostic about this. I don't claim to have some hidden knowledge about it. I'm just putting the pieces together, like any of us are. I think
you are a little Gnostic, because I definitely sense that you're speaking from personal experience.
I feel like I got handed a really big box of pieces along the way here. So I think I'm speaking from somewhat from experience, but also, somewhat blindfolded at the same time. I hold out the possibility that it could be nothing more than amusement, to be going. In the book, I talk about the fact that the teleology of the self may be to keep acquiring the wisdom that enables you to actually experience God while in time. you know, that may very well be the
Maybe
individual's.
it's maybe in each life it's harder, you know, maybe it takes a lot of lifetimes in order to actually be able to integrate such an experience.
Yeah, and that's, you know, any Hindu would tell you that too. I mean, that's nothing new. Like that's um, but
I believe it
um,
can also go in the reverse, by the way, that we as beings can also lose our what we had learned and gained. And, you know, it always kind of seems to balance out too. Like no matter, you know, the kind of the law of compensation, for every loss, there's a gain, and for every gain, there's a
mhm,
loss. So even when we improve in certain ways, um, we lack something or we lose something. Um, and no matter who you are in life, or what life, you know, what kind of being you are, whether it's a beetle, you know, or a monkey or whatever, there's a whole new set of parameters, so to speak, of what you need to know. You know, there's like for us humans, we need certain life lessons, certain morals to kind of hopefully learn and cover and pass up
mhm,
before we, you know, reach a certain age and pass on. But it can revert back to, you know, eventually something that, and I also believe the cycle will finally complete where you start all over anyway. And you go back to the level of the insect, so to speak, or a germ, whatever, just something
mhm,
that's, you know, very simplistic. But then you build up again. And the reason why nature, I think, does that is because that's the spice of life. We want to learn. We want to, it's just like you know, when we're hungry and we want to eat, or when we're thirsty and we need a drink. Uh, so we have these things, these needs that inspire us and cause us to have certain desires. And you know, you're talking about will, Waldo. You know,
mhm,
the us beings, we have to have certain compulsions, if you will, like a will to want and to desire to do certain things. And so certain life forms, whether you're a cat or whatever, you're going to have certain set of you're going to be stimulated or inspired in different ways to do different things. So it's never going to be this complete thing where we evolve into like the perfect being and then we just stay there forever. So it's
right.
kind of a circle, or a kind of a jump around kind of a thing. So
Mhm.
it's not a
I mean,
perfect.
you know, most beings that we can observe, you know, have a well, I shouldn't say most. Most are completely non-autonomous because they're being moved rather than moving.
Mm,
We do have, you know, a certain um, subset of complex organisms that have volition and have some degree of autonomy, that are also primarily dialed into instinct, and that's how they, you know,
mhm,
that's how they choose what is the good, you know, in their life.
mhm,
We as primates, and then especially as humans, have seemed to have reached a certain capacity for um, what I call fully subjective selfhood, or fully selved subjectivity is probably a better way to say it, where we think of ourselves as a complete unit of being, both to our, you know, benefit and detriment.
no, yeah.
Um, and um, that is the thing that's the that again that but all of these things are fit within the concept of soul, as we're as it's been laid out, you know, as we've been discussing it. um it's just that at the level of the human being, there's self-reflectiveness rather than just, you know, looking out at the world and responding to the world. We can look at the world and think about what we're thinking about, so to speak.
Mhm. Do,
um
do you appreciate the individual? Like I know that you know, the individual perspective, the selfhood.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah, some.
Absolutely. And I actually, that's something that has developed over recent years. I used to not so much.
I was just going to say, you know, in my first video when I was talking about if scientists could one day, because I was thinking that one day scientists will maybe be able to detect that separation of that subversion of me that separates, and even encapsulate it, and even communicate with it and interface with it. And
Right.
and you were saying, well, that's kind of like reinventing the wheel. And it made me think, well, maybe you think it's unnecessary, or because I want to preserve this personality and this. I know it's temporary. This version of me, this, think of the ego and the personal perspective. Just because I've had such a, it's not a perfect life, but I've enjoyed my life for the most part, and I enjoy what I have finally accomplished in terms of my worldview, which could be completely wrong. But I just finally, I feel like it took what it took to achieve who I am today. And I want to try to preserve that the best I can, even though I know that eventually I'll have to let go and let Guyus disappear, basically. But I would love to try to hold on to him as long as I can. And who knows, maybe one day we will learn how to hold on to our local selves, for example, for 500 years. It might become quite common.
I want to address that because I do think we have the ability to do that. And
I think we do too. I actually do.
Because, as I'm hearing this discussion, I can definitely basically see where in some ways we agree on so many things. And then in another way, what I'm hearing throughout a lot of this conversation are things that I think make a lot of sense, but I always am seeing things through a much more, how do I explain this? I'm a very materialist person, but I don't think that material is what we think it is. I think that material is alive, and I think that material is it has this person inside of it. It persons. It becomes basically everything that we know in living beings. But I also see it's like basically when you say maybe one day we'll be able to differentiate, be able to save ourselves, for future generations, we're already starting to do that with robots that, we very soon, I see that we're going to be basically having our grandmother. And I thought they were going to do this in the Jetsons, which was to have a robot in the house, but that robot had the spirit or the soul of the grandmother inhabiting it. And then at the same time, we have all of these little things that that grandma used to say, and she would say them every once in a while. She would glitch out and be like, "Oh, grandma's on, she's glitching. We have to repair her, and fix her, from saying this some kind of thing over and over." And I think we already are preserving who we are through our media. I say that we have 3 layers of biological evolution. One is an endo-evolutionary layer of our biology. Then we have an inter-evolutionary aspect of our subjective experience. And then we have an exo-evolutionary layer, which is our clothes, our houses, our technology. And in that group, we have books, we have now music. I mean, if I want to listen to Jimi Hendrix and make Jimi Hendrix a living presence in my living room, all I do is just bring on, a show of him, and he's filling up the room. His spirit, his soul is right there. And, if you want to turn that into a computer program, we could do that, and they're going to do that. But I don't think that captures the real soul or essence of that. It may be largely the essence. Basically, what I'm saying is that we have a lot of different ways that we preserve who we are. And I think this is the reason why I kind of actually feel that reincarnation is a problem for me. And this is not to take away from any of your philosophies and ideas on this, because I think that they're very intriguing. And next time, or in a future discussion, I would like to have read your book, Waldo, and that way I can get some more of the particulars. But basically what I feel is that if you emphasize your own personal soul journey, in some ways that kind of does sort of take you out of what it is that's the limitations inside of the beings that you are, who you are, and the beings with whom you are like currently manifest and living with. In other words, I'm not sure if I think that it matters who I used to be or who I might be in the next life. I feel like I have to focus more on doing what I can with this one life. And not only that, but looking at mortality and the fact that my life is going to come to an end. So I don't put off tasks that I think that are important for me for another life, or just kick it down the road and I'll never die. I do think that in some ways I am eternal. I think we're all eternal, but I think that we are both immortal and mortal, and that we should celebrate our mortality as much as we may. I think we have this strong urge, and you spoke about this urge of preserving yourself, Gaius. We all have this strong urge to be permanent. And we all have a strong urge to get out of this situation of being stuck in an aging body. And, that's a very understandable urge. But I feel like if we already are eternal, we should, on one level, we should feel safe and secure that after we die, we don't just enter into nothing, or, that we're gone completely. But at the same time, we should really, I think, be looking to ways that we can make our lives this time worth it as much as we possibly can.
I know what you're saying there. It has to do with appreciation. In order for us to truly appreciate not only life, but who we are, there does have to be some sense of impermanence. And it's because of that impermanence, to at least some level, that's what makes it more meaningful. And we want to do things now, like you're saying, not put it off, not think, oh, it's covered, I'll get to that, or whatever. I also find this, I have the same outlook when I view pain and suffering. Pain and suffering is what we need, it because it's what allows life to be important to us. It's why we it motivates us to do certain things and to care about certain things and care about people in a way that if we did not have pain and suffering, I just don't think we would. I just don't think it would be possible to truly care for one another and for it to be important and valuable to us. So to your point, I'm glad that to some degree, and in the back of my mind, it's always there, I do know that I will dissolve away in one way or another eventually. If not, sooner or later, it's going to happen. I am going to lose myself. Whether I'm the perceiving passenger continues on or not, I don't get preserved to myself in that moment, as I'm transitioning. So I take the good with the bad. It's not all good news. It's some of it's bad news. Reincarnation is not going to paradise, where you live happily ever after. It's not like that. It's not the Abrahamic view. So when we are reincarnated, as I think we will be, we're going to still have to deal with life's problems, with the ups and downs, and we are going to still have to experience pain and suffering and sadness and fear. It'll hopefully be unique. It'll hopefully be stimulating.
Yeah, experiencing those things is part of the reason for incarnating. I don't does it matter what our past lives were? Only to the extent that we can bring wisdom across into this life, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Only to the extent that we learn from it, that we don't backtrack, to use a Christian term, we don't want to. There are many times in this life when I could have descended into alcoholism or worse things, for instance, and there was a will in me that chose not to. And as far as looking to the future, I don't think it diminishes this life, because Waldo is still only happening once. Okay, I don't get to bring Waldo to the next life. I don't get to bring his accomplishments. I don't get to bring the books that I write. I don't get to bring the relationships that I make. I get to do them now. Okay, as you're saying, Peter, the imperative to do them now is why I'm here. Okay. What I get from knowing that I continue is the ability to bring that wisdom to another form. I don't want to continue Waldo. I'm excited to start somebody new. I'm excited to start from the beginning with a vague memory of what Waldo did, so that I can build on it. Maybe again, like this is part of the cyclical time element of everything, but that next step in the lineage might be 500 years ago from this point of view. Like I might, it is not necessarily, somewhere in the 21st century. In other words, it could be literally anywhere on the timeline that we as humans can experience.
Does it ever?
Well,
go ahead.
Now, when in terms of when you speak of that you are invested in this life and you want to use this life to enjoy the things that you have here, and you're not necessarily wanting to relive Waldo, that's really not necessarily so much of my concern, because I don't think that if we believe that we can be reborn again, or that our life continues, that it necessarily takes us out of the moment. So I'm not necessarily making that claim. What I'm making the claim of is that we tend to pair our spirituality with more metaphysical ways of viewing things. I think that it's imperative that we start embedding our spirituality and our understanding of the numinous in life metaphors. And when we spoke of the Jung metaphor of the perennial rhizome, I tend to see things more as a tree of life. I think you guys talk about the tree of life, and the rhizome metaphor is the same as the tree of life metaphor. But when I speak of a tree of life, I am speaking of a literal physical thing that exists here on this planet. And when I think of samsara, I literally think of the gene pool on this planet and all of the billions of life forms that are mixing and merging and evolving, and in a process, just as the billions of human beings, we are in a process of evolving our soul, but in a physical way. And when I say physical, it is in our mind, it is in our spirit, it is in our emotions. But what I mean is that it's all happening as part of the living process. It is integrated seamlessly into the biological. And I'm not saying, Waldo, that you are not connecting what you're saying to a biological process, but I just feel like, spiritually speaking, humanity, I think, is going to benefit by seeing how, say, for example, that ancestral memory is a metaphor for reincarnation, and how epigenetics influence, how. So basically, ancestral memory is connected to culture. And for example, I think that we're losing culture very quickly in this world. Many of the languages of the past are getting lost. Many of the memories are getting lost. And I do think that it's important for us to believe in ancestral memory, but we also need to really look at it closely to make sure that we're not just assuming, oh, well, our ancestral memories will keep us, keep my people's myths intact. No, I think that we need to pass culture. I think that we need to do things like writing books. I think we need to be documenting great minds and people and holding on to our history. I'm just saying that there are practical, physical ways that we can basically look at what I call the metaphor of reincarnation and make it more real, so that we do have a guided evolution, that our will is done on Earth as it is. That we are actually doing things. Basically, I think that we are reincarnating, but I think it's more of a physical process. And I think that it's a process that's occurring to actual living beings in real time, and that we're all a reincarnation of the things that came before us, and that we're all partially animals. We're reincarnations of animals. And there's too many things to get into right now, because I know we're kind of summing things up, but I really would like to get together on this and kind of get into some of the particulars again. And maybe I'll have to talk to you at some point, Waldo, about buying one of those books as well. Anybody watching this should also consider ponying
everybody
copy.
Yep. I don't deny what you are saying. I just think that they are two intersecting planes of the same reality. I think that biological evolution is an absolute phenomenon that we study and we learn to our great benefit. like that what you're saying is absolutely true as well. And we are what we do biologically and physically, like this is where I'm losing my ability to really communicate this, but the way that waves are both happening on the vertical and the horizontal plane, what you're talking about is basically the water moving up and down, but also making a certain progress horizontally across the surface of the ocean. I think that there's, metaphorically, there is something to be said there for the way that that the biological processes and the I hate the word spiritual, but it's I don't know what a better one right now. The spiritual evolution of the pneuma, riding those waves, in and out, and in a cyclical process rather than a linear process. I think history moves in linear fashion. I mean, there's no denying that. But we ride. I do believe that I could in due time convince you that we ride history in a cyclical way, so that we can participate in it from as many different perspectives as we can.
And to enhance that culture you were talking about, culturally, trying to pay attention to certain things.
Maybe I will bring, pantheist, insight to a small cult of Middle Easterners, 1,500 years ago. As a matter of possibility, and that's why we have this this pocket of mysticism in the rising at a certain time that has a certain influence. But it's I mean, that's all speculative. I think but the basic idea is there's a certain amount of harmony, I think, between what we're talking about, that which is why I don't think this is a debate. I think this is more about like integrating different perspectives and even different dimensions to this conversation. Like it's not we prove one in order to disprove the other. It's like we're looking at it like, how do these integrate in a way that is going to speak to people looking at it from both perspectives and both
I guess before I forget, I was just going to try to show some of these really cool images that I found online. What this picture kind of reminded me of is that, in a weird way, in a very real sense, we're made up of all these little particles. I mean, this is just one point of view, of course, the scientific point of view. And these tiny little particles, in a sense, aren't even touching, yet we have this perceiving consciousness. And I just find that, it's when you think of us made up of like these little particles, these little balls that don't even touch. But then, there's, of course, it's all ultimately connected in some way. But that's just one of the aspects of the universe, even on a scientific level, that starts to come off as magical. I mean, just like ultimate, like when Peter was also kind of discussing, like, we don't really know what the physical is. We don't know what matter is. When you really get right down to it, what is matter? I mean, it's all ultimately just unknowable, or, we have names for things. And it helps us.
I think we can define matter fairly well.
Yeah, but for example, when you say, like, well, it's something that's math and it takes up space. Well, what is that? What is it really? You can keep diving further and further in. Like, no matter what explanation you can give, you're always going to be able to dive deeper. When you try to describe what an atom is, for example, what the physical is, we know it has resistance, for example, degrees of resistance, so.
I recall that you guys brought that up last time, and I, in the last video when I was.
Oh, did we?
I would have loved to have had a shot at that one, but that may have to wait till the next time.
Oh, in this picture, right quick, this just reminded me of the rhizome in the quote, the first quote that I gave at the beginning of this video.
Now, see, to me, this looks like matter in the sense that matter is just eddies of energy and certain eddies.
Yeah.
And from certain angles, you can't get in on the eddy, and then from other angles, you can get into the eddy.
Yeah. But to me, like, I believe that we have like these eternal roots, so to speak, or like an eternal rhizome, like in that quote on your Facebook page. Like, we're really attached. It's almost like this infinite umbilical cord that our consciousness is connected to. And it's like this infinite tail, and you can never fully cut it off. You can never just cut it off and separate it, the consciousness from the eternal, infinite cosmic tail, or roots, so to speak. And then here's Waldo's fractals that he likes. I love the whole fractal, the Fibonacci sequence and the different fractals. God, I actually had a video. I don't have it here with me, but just an amazing video that kind of shows how, as you zoom in, it just keeps, there's no escaping it, kind of a thing.
Is that a recent one? That I just saw something about a deep dive into the Mandelbrot set.
Mandelbrot, that's what I was trying to remember. I was trying to remember the name Mandelbrot.
There's a couple of great ones out there, but it's definitely fractal reality is, there's no question we're experiencing some aspect of fractal reality.
Yeah. When I was in college was the first time I saw a poster with a Mandelbrot fractal, kind of like this one, although it was actually even more complex. And I remember it was in my art class in college, and it was hanging on the wall, and my jaw just dropped. I knew that I didn't fully understand it, but I knew it was profound. And I was just like, oh my God, where can I get a copy of that? Because like that was showing this concept that I had been thinking about philosophically, of how it's all attached and repeating and cyclical. And I knew that I could tell a computer generated it. And I just thought, wow, how amazing is that?
Well, that might be not a bad place to kind of sum up for me, at least in terms of, and in terms of what I mean by that is when you see the irrational and rational nature of fractals, I think that very much reflects what it is that we're dealing with in this existence. And I've had to kind of come to a certain realization that I view the world from, you were talking about that reincarnation is sort of, it is in contrast to the Abrahamic faiths. And I see Abrahamic faiths and the Buddhist faiths, not just Buddhist, but Eastern faiths, being similar in this way. But the way I've come to learn to see spirituality is somewhat of a little bit more, and I use this term very hesitantly. It is his birthday, I believe, today, but in a little bit more Lovecraftian way. Mm-hmm. Mandelbrot set opens up to me a possibility that this universe is just extremely strange, and that we experience and deal with a world that is an extremely strange and paradoxical thing. And that's kind of how I feel. I feel that spiritual phenomenon and the numinous is embedded in the strangeness of this reality, and that we should, that's why it's not easy for me to see another world so much as real, because I feel like everything in this world is there's enough strangeness in our own existence.
Yeah.
And, we could get into a whole other long conversation on that. I know Waldo needs to get going, so I don't want to.
Thanks. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's
we'll do this again.
Good place to close.
Yeah.
But thank you both for agreeing to do this and for sitting down for over an hour to do this. And who knows? Now I will maybe have to put the whole podcast thing on hold for a little while, because I'm trying to. I got to get back to trying to file for a patent claim for an invention idea that I've been working on yeah, I've been working on that off and on for several years. I'm finally getting down to trying to file a patent on it. And I got to really like focus on, because it's the literature, trying to read how to actually file a patent, it can get complicated. So I got to really focus on that for a while and kind of put this on hold maybe.
That's okay. I have a book to finish. I'm with you.
Yeah, but I would love to. I've always thought that I would love to create a channel like this where we just talk about all kinds of cool topics. In fact, in one of my next podcasts, I would like to talk about the Big Bang Theory, because I'm one of those who believes that the universe has always existed and always will. And now the James Webb Telescope is finally bringing forth evidence that that the theory kind of doesn't hold water. And actually, scientists have actually known about this for decades, that the theory didn't hold, the Big Bang Theory, it doesn't hold water. And so that's a whole thing, though, to tap into, that I would love to tap into. But,
You bring me in for that. I'll talk about cyclical time.
yeah.
It'll be a good component.
Yeah. All right. I guess for anybody who's watching and will be watching, thank you for making it this long, all the way to the end, if you did. And thank you all for showing up. Everyone, try to stay balanced.
All right. Thanks, guys.